I felt extremely embarrassed that we haven't even mentioned it or spoke about it in a single lecture in the past. So what we come up with last night as well. Two people come up with, because they didn't. Oh right, yeah, I didn't tell you what. I didn't tell you guys what people in Cumbria actually come up with, right? So I will tell you, right? So in short, the lectures that we've got coming up, right? It's a massive list. It's writing in the Iron Age, taking us across the whole of Europe, which was like, I thought that's not going to be possible because technically, can you have writing in the Iron Age? And yes, you can. We've already mentioned this, and I thought, right, yeah, we're going to do that. And something that I don't rightly like looking at is, where's Henry gone? All right, something I don't like looking at, but we're going to do it. Was there hierarchy in the British Iron Age? And that's a very interesting one, because you'd think that there is, but then again, you might think that there isn't. So obviously we've got medical practice in the Iron Age. We've got textiles in the Iron Age, including Cyprus. We've got musical instruments, including the bibgorn that Goff was very confused about what the hell it was. So we'll have me playing it when we do that one. And we've got another lecture looking at chariots and wheels, children and pets, and then we've got the likes of an update on the Mus Farm project, the Nessa Brodga, and then we've got the Sweden versus the Iron Age Scottish rock art, Iron Age food, and what else did we have? Oh, vitrified forts, Huddersfield. Yeah, we got Maiden Castle versus Heinenberg in Germany. Hang on a minute, Anne. I think we're going to get to what else have we got? We got the Black Loch of Meryton in Scotland. And if I haven't got children, the post-it's been. We've got right. Hang on.
It was last week.
Pets. We got pets in the Iron Age.
Right.
And we got Alderney.
Right.
And we've obviously got children. Which is yes.
Maybe toys, yeah.
Children, yeah, that's what we said. Children and toys. So we've got a lot to get on with. And Henry said, back shortly, laptop just went offline. So Richard, you're gonna have to look out for him. So before we start, I've got to ask Goff that question. Goff, did you listen to that story on Radio 4 Plus?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yes, very good.
Yeah. And Richard, I am embarrassed. It was so good, I can't remember what it was about. Can you remind us, Goff?
Well, I can't remember now exactly what it was about.
Oh yeah, I can tell you. Basically, it was the story of two archaeologists, and it was to do with the Caracalla catacombs. And one guy was explaining to this other guy, but anyway, it ended up that this one guy had gone off with this other guy's love of his life, and they went down into these catacombs, and they really went deep into these catacombs, and it was pitch black down there, and the one who wanted revenge said, "Oh, can I hold the lantern? I want to show you how dark it's down here." And then suddenly he starts to go away from the guy who says, "Oh, I need to see." And he says, "Well, it's tough, you can't see, you've got all the time in the world now to explore this place in the dark." So it's quite an interesting story, the type of thing that me and Goff love. So there you go. Anne, Goff, any other news from you?
No news, no, nothing, unfortunately, no.
Right, anything else from you, Anne?
No, not this week. Sorry.
Good.
Okay, don't apologise. It's fine. And what about you, Richard?
Nothing from me.
You know what? He's looking very mischievous and naughty, as if he's eaten a whole box of fucking chocolate.
No, he's eating his biscuit.
Right.
And his coffee.
I gotta say, Richard, right? When I was trying to put that stuff on from the
Oh,
Gary into,
Twix. Oh, I like
oh,
Twix.
go away, Richard.
Wow.
Um, the thing is, right down here, a pack of a Twix is £2. That cost me
I
£2.
know. They've gone terrible prices. Oh,
Anyway, let's
no.
talk about Twixes. Richard, I was going to
Gotta
say,
have a little snack now and then, you know, and
Hang on,
oh God, you
Miss
gotta pay
Henry.
£2.
hang on a minute, it's gone up, Anne, I said it was £2. Now the chocolate bar's gone up to £3 in the space of like a few seconds.
Oh, oh, did Goff
Oh.
go to see the film yet?
Friday afternoon.
Oh, right. Yeah, Pat said it was a bit too gory. She said she didn't fancy it.
Hey, spoiler alert.
Huh?
Spoiler alert.
You can't say anything, Anne. Oh,
No,
good.
okay.
Oh, God, I'm lost. I was trying to ask Richard something, right? Richard, you know that article you did on the Edgerton Grey? I cannot get it into a text form. So can you send me a text document, please?
Yeah, okay.
You posted it as a bloody image. I go to cut and paste the bloody thing. I can't use it. Oh, by the way, the photograph you used, is that the same? Is that one of your photos?
Yeah.
Oh, we want to use that. It's great. Lovely. Right, okay, you need to get that over to me because I was a bit miffed that I couldn't put it in. Anyway, right, after you've spent so long trying to get the information. Anyway, talking about The Walking Dead, anything from you, Henry?
No.
No, all right, now let's crack on.
Just a minute.
Right, okay, so all right, now this is last night when we did this about salt manufacture. It was fairly easy flowing, but it was quite in depth, right? So as we got a shorter time tonight, I just thought maybe I'll just condense it a little bit more. There's a little bit of repetition, right? But I'll try and get to the points a little bit quicker. So we've got those images in front, right? But then I said, let's look at this. Now, I've had this on the computer for a while, right? And can you remember back when we did the Mesolithic stuff about 2 years ago, right? And somebody said maybe the reason why we can't find Mesolithic evidence is because people lived up trees. And then I basically said, hang on a minute, what do we usually find? What do we usually find with the Mesolithic period? We find little bits of burnt clay amongst the assemblages of bits of knap flint, but there's no evidence of any burning in the soil. And you're thinking, right, the only thing that this could be is that he lived in trees. Anyway, I looked at this and I actually thought, right, people still live in tree houses today. This is 45 meters up, right? This is these are some of the Papua people, right? Anyway, the Karawi people of Papua, Indonesia, are famed for their towering tree houses, which can soar up to 45 meters above the forest floor. This practice dates back centuries, reflecting their adaptation to dense tropical rainforest environment. Historically, the Karawi people built these elevated homes as a defense against flooding and predators, including wild animals, rival tribes, and people looking for statues of Lloyd George. The tree houses, constructed from local materials such as wood and palm leaves, exemplify the Karawi deep connection to their natural surroundings and their traditional methods of craftsmanship. Despite increased contact with the outside world in recent decades, these remarkable structures remain a vital part of their cultural heritage. And I actually thought, you know, I wanted to basically show you that, and I just thought, right, you know, people. I know people. We know people lived in tree houses in the past, but if tree houses is that sort of endemic in sort of prehistoric living people, why can't they have lived in tree houses in the Mesolithic period, for example? right? Pat's just joined us. Right, anyway, Pat's actually joined us at about the right time because we're going to actually go into the lecture proper, right? So here we go. And if we go there, so we're looking
Well,
at right.
it's getting very fashionable again to live in tree houses.
Well, lots of people have said to me, Anne, that I'm off my tree.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Anne, for for a
No,
compliment.
yours isn't like a tree house.
No, I meant mental health. Never mind. We won't even go there. Right. Okay then. So all right. Now that word there, bricotage, right? And the question is, what is bricotage?
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, it might be a new term for you today, but it's something that you've got to be very careful with when you actually find it on Iron Age archaeological sites. And bricotage usually relates to the salt mining or the salt creation or the salt processing or the salt whatever trade industry culture in Britain in the Iron Age, right? And I started going into this and I thought, why have I never ever done this before? Right. And I actually thought I was very excited when we actually had all those subjects that people wanted us to look at, because some of those subjects I may not have ever touched with a barge pole. Weirdly enough, I come up with this salt processing via doing research into Iron Age lime kiln industry, right? And you just go down down this avenue. And I actually ended up apologizing to him last night. I said, look, I said, because half of them live in Cumbria, right? And I said, look, guys, we're not gonna do the Cumbrian Iron Age salt mining industry because there's too much evidence of it, right? When I say mining, processing, I don't know why I'm using the word mining, but you mine salt in Europe, but Iron Age salt processing, right? And there was so much evidence in Cumbria. I just said to him last night, I'm not doing it. You can do your own research on that, which you can do the Iron Age salt processing in other parts of Britain. It says bricotage, iron slag, sherds, right? So the bricotage is on the left, the iron slag is in the middle, and the sherds are on the right. Right. Now the point is, what is bricotage? Basically, bricotage is actually sherds, right? But bricotage is deliberately Iron Age broken pottery, single-use broken pottery, yeah, that was the byproduct of their salt processing industry.
Oh.
So when you go on an archaeological site and it's in the Iron Age and you find lots of bits of heavy pottery, right, it's very likely not to be accidentally broken, but it's become deliberately broken because it was used in the Iron Age salt processing industry. Right now, when I knew something about the Iron Age salt mining industry, right? Because on a Thursday, roughly around 2015, 2016, they were filming at Marcross. They were filming at Marcross, just below the lighthouse, in the valley there. And I was investigating the remains of reports of human remains being found on the coast. Right now, I saw that there was a phone number, and I phoned this phone number, and they were actually there. They were preparing filming for the TV series Britannia, right? Now, and I phoned them up and I said, look, I'm an archaeologist, right? um, do you need um, input from archaeologists with your series? You know, obviously to get this historically correct. But one of the things that they were doing, right, they actually created artificial salt pan processing beds, right? Which, to be honest with you, I'm glad I didn't advise them on the series because I didn't have a clue what the hell they were. But anyway, I didn't get the job because I was teaching an archaeology class on a Thursday that they wanted to see me, and I decided to do the class. And unfortunately, I couldn't get to see them, and I didn't get the work, unfortunately. But anyway, the point is that was my first experience with salt processing, salt panning, right? Now, so there's not as many images tonight, but they are there, right? So what we're going to start off with is the following. Oh no, we'll go to this, right? We'll go to this image, right? So briquetage, otherwise known as very coarse pottery, technical term in archaeology, VCP, is a coarse ceramic material used to make evaporation vessels and supporting pillars used in extracting salt from brine or seawater, right? Now, without any research, right, you would think it's like a pot which is supported by pillars in like an open kiln, right, to evaporate the water so that you're left with salt residue, right? But part of that I've just explained is completely wrong. When it says supporting pillars, right, the supporting pillars are actually part of the pot. In fact, these things, the tops of these would have actually, like, there was an integral pot which then had this long pillar at the bottom. This is what this is. So it's a pot which has got a pillar on it, right? And these would then support themselves in a kiln as the pot. So in other words, the pot is actually like this, right? All of these had pots. It was integral. These didn't support pots. These were actually part of the pots. So if you think about amphora, right? They had legs, big single legs, right? So I'm glad I looked this up, because if I'd have tried to explain, I would have been explaining it completely wrong, right? So anyway, so what they would have is there's two ways of looking at this. You might have huge salt pans, which might be big copper pans, right? Or you might have big pottery pans, or what you might have is what I need to describe this. Basically, you've got these stone cut trays at very high tide, right? And then what you do, you collect seawater, and hopefully the sun comes out, right? The sun shines on that water. You've seen it on the beach, right? You've got a skim of salt, and you scrape it out, and that's got your salt, right? That's what they were trying to produce down at Mar Cross. But salt pans themselves, in the realist form, are big pans where you're left with a scum of salt, right? And then you put them in those containers, those evaporation vessels, that are then put over bigger fires, right, with their supporting pillars, right? So often the bulk of water would be allowed to evaporate, whether it's in your salt pans or your salterns. Don't go there. There's different ways of looking at this, right? And then these are all put into your briquetage pots for final reduction. And guess what happens then? You break the pots apart to actually obtain a salt cake, right? And the salt cake would then be traded, right? And last night it was like people understood, but they couldn't understand why this was so wasteful. But I explained it thus, right? I explained it thus. When in the late 1500s, in the 1600s, people used to buy the tobacco in a clay pipe, right? So when you've smoked the clay pipe, you would chuck the clay pipe away because you were sold tobacco in the clay pipe. So basically, today's vape culture, where you get a disposable vape, right? The vaping product is more valuable than the disposable vaping, that thing you find littering across the streets, right? It's the same thing, right? So in modern day society, we say, oh my God, people vaping, it's disgusting. They're chucking all that plastic away and all those little bits of electronics and stuff, and they're chucking it away, right? But the people vaping, the product that they're vaping is far more valuable than that vape thing that they've got, right? It's exactly the same process when we're looking at briquetage, right? Same process when we're looking at clay pipes. So the salt was so valuable. And the other thing as well is there's two sets of archaeologists arguing the following, right? That the salt would have been transported in the pot that the pots that were used over the fire, right? But you've got the big long legs, right? Another archaeologist saying, well, that's a bit of a waste. Just take the salt cake out, right? And the salt cakes themselves the salt cakes themselves are basically, the volume is usually about a pint, right? So you're talking about a pint of salt, which would be massively valuable. And then what you then have is they would have traded these in baskets and various other organic containers, right? And anyway, we go a lot further into that a little bit later. So this briquetage stuff on the left here, that stuff on the left, is found across Europe from as early part of the Bronze Age. We know the salt itself, salt working sites across Europe, and we're interested in Britain today, right? Salt working across Europe goes back 8,000 years, right? And since then, we've done lectures, a whole series of lectures on the Neolithic period, and we didn't mention salt once. We've done a whole lectures on the Bronze Age, and we haven't mentioned salt once.
Well, I suppose if you went into food, you might start like talking about preserving food and things like
But
that.
we didn't. We've done food, and we've just like taken it for granted, right? In all the lectures that we've done, and because this study of salt manufacture, right, is something so understudied. And it was like a revelation when I was doing it. It was like I thought, well, I can't get over this. That I've never ever done anything on this in my entire life. Right? It was shocking. I shocked myself. I really did. So during the Iron Age, salt was produced in Britain by heating seawater in large ceramic pots over hot flames to evaporate the water and leave salt crystals, right? So we're talking about different ways of doing this. You naturally have these salt pans on the beach, right? Which and you put the water in it, and then the sun heats it up, and you scrape a bit of salt. Or you've actually got pans that are heated over a fire, right? Loads of different ways. And we're going back to this: gather water, place seawater in large ceramic pots, or you can put brine. Now, I don't know if I've seen this, and I'm sorry, I can be an extreme geek. Me and Goff are complete geeks with this because we listen to all this stuff. Sorry, Goff, if calling you a geek, but Goff knows what I'm talking about. Me and Goff listen to unusual things occasionally. And basically, you might come across people talking about brine pits. And basically, brine pits are basically water inland, right, where for one reason or another, salt's been trapped due to various changes and stuff. And it spews out this really salty, really heavy salt water, right? And then you get the brine and you heat it up over time, and then you extract the salt. You extract the salt crystals. Mind you, it's not the type of salt that I would come across. But anyway, heat support the pots with stones over hot flames. You know that. Evaporate the water to leave salt crystals. We got that. And collect. You've got then what you get. You've got all this sort of salt that you've got through evaporation, heat, and water gathering. You chuck it all together, and you put it in these vessels, and you eventually heat this up again, and you get this big lump of salt. Right. So archaeologists have found evidence of salt production in Britain, in lots of locations, and we're going to look at Lincolnshire and East Anglia Fenlands. Large amounts of briquetage or pottery vessels used in the salt production process have been found in these areas. And I did apologise last night. I basically said, read this on the screen, yeah, right? Because I'm going to read. Got some other text in front of me, which I'm going to read out. So you're aware of this. I basically said last night. I said, well, I'm obsessed with salt tonight, and I want to relay how important salt was to prehistoric people. It's in a way, salt trade in Britain was more extensive and more valuable than the iron industry, which is quite. I'm saying that I'm quite shocked I've even said it, but. So if I read this stuff in front of me, right, and then sort of ancient times, about 4,700 years ago, the Chinese Piangxia Kami document, the Panxiao Kami document, is an old Chinese document, 4,700 years ago, and this document recorded as some of the earliest known writings recording salt and the use in China 4,700 years ago, right? And it says about salt, and it talks about, wait for it, 40 different types of salt. Now, I'm sure if you go into Tesco's today, other brands available, including Waitrose, you can get like 4 different types of salt: rock salt, Himalayan salt, natural salt, chemical salt. Maybe you can get Radox salt for the bath, maybe another, about 6, right? But in China, they list at least 40 different types of salt. So you're thinking that, this is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And actually, there's something that was quoted on BBC Radio 4 today, actually. I can't remember when I heard it because I've been traveling a lot today, actually. But I was listening to BBC Radio 4, and somebody was talking about the old Library of Alexandria, right? And they made a very important point. They said the people who live in Alexandria in the 400s wouldn't have defended the Library of Alexandria, right? Because they didn't know anything about the science inside. They didn't understand what the documents were about. They were distant from the information, right? So therefore, they wouldn't have protected it, right? And the point is that's the reverse of the importance of salt, because whereas something very valuable like that gets destroyed, whereas we're talking about salt today and nobody discusses it because we take it for granted as an everyday thing that everybody's had throughout society, and therefore we can't be asked talking about it because we take it for granted. Whereas the Alexandria library being burnt down, nobody cares about it because nobody understood what was in it, and therefore they didn't protect it. Can you see the analogy there? Anyway, the point is that in this document, the Piangxia Kami document from China, that also looks at 2 methods of extracting and processing salt, similar to methods still in use today, right? So I'm reminded of that there's not much really, right? And Henry knows this. If you go to Limassol, right, there's the Limassol salt extraction pits, right? And there's massive mounds of this salt, right, which is then processed and eventually makes it onto your tables or as salt on the roads or whatever, right?
I
Anyway,
thought
the
you
point
said
is,
liver salt.
yeah, no,
Is that
liver salt, not liver
liver
bloody
salt?
salt. Yeah, we can chuck liver salt in there. Shut up, Anne. Right, I meant Limassol salt in Cyprus.
Yeah,
Bloody liver salt.
you've got the big lake outside Aquatiri, which is just a salt lake. You can drive
Exactly.
your car across it.
Exactly. I'm not fucking doing that, mate. Have you seen my car? It's tiny. But anyway, the point is that the point is with all of this is that salt is so massively important that we've totally ignored it, right? It's like it's like when in history when something's so obvious, people don't talk about it. For example, you don't see many Roman documents talking about sex and relationships and you know various other obvious things, right? Nobody really talks about salt either, except you can find some documents that from ancient Babylon and Egyptian papyri that do mention salt, right? And you can see little images of accepting salt as tribute, right? So salt, and this leads us into something when we look at the Romans, right? Salt itself is something fundamentally vital to all world societies, right? Even without written evidence, we can be fairly certain that salt making and use was a feature of life in all ancient communities. Where isolated from modern trade and technology, some still today make salt by the same prehistoric methods, and probably we more or less make it the same today. Somebody then mentioned last night, right, hang on a minute, why don't you just transport it, right? And I had an answer straight away on this one. They said, right, obviously salt dissolves. Kept my mouth closed. Obviously salt dissolves, and why don't you just transport it in those briquetage pots, right? So it doesn't dissolve. And then my gob opened. I said, right, we've got salt cakes for my sheeps, right? You leave them there
Mm,
and you have torrential rain and the salt cakes are still there
mm,
because the acids of the sheep with their tongue lick, they got very rough tongues, right? Their tongues basically grind the salt off this big salt lick, right? And to be honest with you, if you left that lump of salt out for 2 years, it would probably still be there, right? Anyway, the point is when you've confounded and condensed salt, right? It stays like that for a very, very long time, right? And you know, some I don't know who said this last night, but I realized the importance, right? Somebody said that in the Second World War, right, because of the properties of salt and ice and sawdust, you can make bridges. And I just thought this technology had been adapted in they built bridges and all sorts of things in towards Russia and all the rest of it, right? Um, by the qualities of salt and sawdust and ice, right? So therefore, the point is if salt is confounded in the right way with whatever material, it will remain solid for quite a long time. Yeah.
mm.
Anyway, crack on. We'll go to this. We'll just a bit more sort of images because Goff likes his images. We haven't got many images tonight. I just went off on one. So in the British Isles, prehistoric man will have made it his salt from seawater or from the few places where inland brine springs had been discovered. Traces of we've already mentioned that. Traces of these activities are difficult to identify, but we are finding them. Now we know that there is a trade in Neolithic salt in Cheshire, Neolithic salt trade, right? And then I basically said Westmoreland, which is actually southern modern day Cumbria. That's where we go, right? And then what we do have then is evidence, which is quite strange. Now, listen to this little fact, right? We got trade, we got evidence, which I'm still trying to work out and I can't, that people from Cheshire were trading their salt with people in Cumbria for axes, when in fact they're mass producing salt in Cumbria as well. So why aren't they using their own salt in Cumbria? What's special about Cheshire salt? Anyway, let's move on. So the Iron Age, archaeological evidence of Iron Age salt making in Britain has largely been mistaken or misinterpreted or missed. But when you start to understand the remnants of coarse pottery with those great phallic looking pillars that we'll look at the end, right, you can actually start to understand that this is a massive, wide-ranging industry. Seawater or brine from inland springs was evaporated in vessels over fires to give a residual lump of salt that we know as salt cake. There's loads of different ways of saying this, and basically we go back and forth looking at this actually. So we look at Lincolnshire today. Actually Lincolnshire, right, is a really interesting landscape for salt prognostication. Right? Prognostication. It's not a word I use often, but it's in the right context. Prognosticate, right? And I'm using that in a soothsaying form or to postulate over in that sense, but we've got lots of evidence nevertheless. So on the left-hand side, you've got Lincolnshire. On the right-hand side, you've got Leicestershire, right? So there's a massive trade between Lincolnshire and Leicestershire throughout prehistory, right? And we've actually got a salt way, right? And this is where it gets really interesting, right? We're going to go through all these images again. I'm going to go back over the other stuff. Anyway, so basically near the coast of the likes of Lincolnshire, right? Near the coast of the likes of Lincolnshire, right? What we and then we go into Leicestershire on the left-hand side, right? There's evidence of these huge pottery pans. Wait for it. Just get your head around this because I can't, right? Handmade pottery pans that are 12 millimeters thick, that are big pans that are 60 centimeters wide. So that's over half a meter wide by over 120 centimeters long, which had already been fired, and then were then pans that you would fill up with seawater salt, suspend over a fire to then extrapolate the salt in a form, and then put it in these. Then you'd put it in these other vessels to try and re-evaporate, right, to get the lump of salt, right. So again, this is a huge thing, and you start to think, well, I think the one question was last night, right, is we've been finding so much evidence of this salt manufacture. What the friggin' hell did they do with it, right? And we started to go blank. It was like, right, how much salt can you consume? How much salt can you use? We just couldn't come up with the answers. Well, I said something really stupid last night, right? A few years back, about 8 years ago, right? Somebody said they're using Himalayan salt and they have a spoonful a day, right? Now, I misinterpreted this, right? So I thought for my health, I would take a spoonful of Himalayan salt raw every single day, right? And then I discovered they meant you should have it Himalayan salt in your food every single day. For a family, 1 spoonful of salt. So I quickly stopped eating spoonfuls of salt. But the point is, then when we bring that into this, right, I'm thinking, okay, right, you can trade salt, okay, but there's loads of it being traded. We get loads of this bricotage, right? We got loads of it. There's loads of this broken briquetage everywhere. You got evidence of these pottery pans, right? You've got these areas where you've got these rock cut sort of boxes in the rock on the coastline, right, where they were obviously putting salt, it would evaporate. We looked at that, right? Okay, that's where the Britannia series comes in. So, and you're thinking, well, okay, you put it in your food. You can use it as a salt lick for animals. That's a sensible one. You can,
for preserving food.
yep,
You
and preserving
can't
food. Yeah, we
pork,
got that. We got that.
pork.
Yeah, we got that, and we got that. Yeah.
They do a
You,
lot. They use a lot of salt.
but you can also use salt on deliberately contaminating land because you don't want weeds to grow, right? But even then, Anne, right, this is a lot of salt.
Hmm.
You know, okay, I can understand, my darling, right? I can really understand, right, what you've just said. I can completely take that on board, right? So you use barrels of salt, right? But then how many barrels of salt do you exactly need? Surely when you put a pig, a belly of a pig in a barrel of salt, or
Fish
you
as
take the pig.
well. Fish.
Yeah, but Anne, let me get a point out, right? The salt itself is going to remain there. You're not going to discard the bloody salt after you take the fish out. You're going to put more salt in. So there's only a certain, Anne, can you see the point? There's only a certain amount of salt
Yeah. Well,
that you can use.
it must have been a collateral then, some sort of,
There had to be. There had to be much more. There's got to be
yeah,
more. Please help me on this. There's got to be. What more
like
can you do with salt?
like gold.
Exactly. But you can't eat gold.
No,
That's the point.
you
What can
can't
you do
eat.
with gold? What can you do with gold other than wear it, right? You can't
Yeah,
use gold for building, right? You can't use gold. You can't really use. Oh, you can use gold for mobile devices, but please excuse me, they didn't have mobile devices back in the day, right? So we're gonna, leave that.
do you
Right. So
remember? Do you remember that saying? Worth their salt. She's worth their
we're gonna
salt.
come to that. Sip, sip, sip. We're doing that in a minute. Shut up. The only reason why Goff likes
I'm
these classes is because.
preempting. Sorry.
Anne, this is not the Anne class today. This is a karl-james Langford class with Anne as a guest. Now shut up. Right. You pay for that. You pay for this abuse, Anne. I'm loving it. Yeah. Anne. So what we've got is archaeological digs at salt-making sites in Cheshire and Worcestershire have produced some of this briquetage, right? But we've also got the fact that this is Cheshire and Worcestershire, right? And they're getting their salt from brine. It's not a coastal thing, right? The coastal stuff is coming from Lincolnshire and all the rest of it, and Cumbria, right? It appears that the finished salt was distributed in various different ways, probably in organic containers. Here we go. Clay dug between Middlewich and Nantwich, part of the country, Cheshire, has been shown to have been used to make the pottery fragments found at INA sites. So right, the point is, right, I need to lip serve you on this one, right? Anne, can you go back to your days as a potter? Right, good. Anne, remember it? Right,
Yeah.
okay. I'm gonna right, Anne. I'm gonna order 20 pots, right? Can I have them tomorrow? Yeah, here we go. You worked all night to do these pots, right? We've got loads of this sort of murky, briny sort of salt that we've prepared. Now we need to put them in these containers with the legs, right? And then we need to put that over the fire. Then we're going to produce cakes, right? And come over here. We're going to break every single one of these pots that you've made, right, to obtain the salt cake, right? And then I'm going to turn around and say to you, Anne, I need another 20 for tomorrow. How would you feel?
Pretty
We've got,
stressed.
yeah, but Anne, that is exactly my point. This is a high processing, right? So in other
Yeah.
words, the value of your pot is nothing compared to the
The
salt.
value of the salt.
Yes. And then
Yeah.
Anne, you know where I'm going with this, so zip it a minute, right? Thank
Yeah.
you. Right. In Britain, lead salt pans. Here we go. They had lead salt pans as well, copper salt pans, right? Can you imagine lead salt pans? Ugh. Were used by the Romans at Middlewich, Nantwich, and Northwich, and excavations at Middlewich and Nantwich have revealed extensive salt-making settlements. So the Romans were anal on this salt. They were into it big time, right? Roman soldiers were partly paid in salt. Anne, hang on a minute, Anne. It is said to be from this that we get the word soldier, right?
Oh,
Yeah, because, and listen to this, salder, S-A-L-dare, salder in Latin, salder, which means soldier. The soldier is paid in salt. So therefore, there is soldier paid in salt, soldier. There we go. Meaning that to give salt, meaning to acquire salt. You've acquired salt because you're a soldier. There you go. And also, this is another one. From the same source, we get the word salary, which is salarium. In other words, not solarium, but salarium, salarium. You're paid in salt, right? So it's a salary, salarium. So you're paid in salt. So it's a salary of salt.
right.
But Anne, the problem is, Anne, they're only paid a little bit in salt because Anne, there's only so much you can do with salt. There you go. So, well, then again, am I wrong? I'm probably, Henry's going to jump in the break and he's going to say, look what you can do with salt, okay? I don't give a damn what the Irish can do with salt, but therefore, I'm sure he can come up with a load of ideas. Salt was a scarce and expensive commodity and its value was legendary. To sit, Anne, this is what you're thinking of. To sit above or below the salt identified precedence in the seating arrangements at a feast, according to one's rank. And Anne, you remember this in the Bible, don't you? Not to be worth one salt was a great insult.
Oh, if salt loses its savor, what use is it?
Exactly. And
That's
Anne,
in
here's
the,
another.
that's in
That's
the
in
Bible too.
I think that's in Corinthians, isn't it? Where in Corinthians you say, why do I need to take a small log out of my eye when you've got a big log in yours? Yeah, Corinthians.
Yeah,
But anyway,
yeah.
the Bible compliments some men as being the salt of the earth
Yes.
because the salt comes from the earth. So you're the salt of the earth. So here we go. So at the time of the Roman conquest, British salt making had been long established across Britain. Salt was a vital commodity to the Roman army, and this demand would have been met by establishing military salt works. At the inland sites, the nearly saturated natural brine would require much less fuel and time to make salt than from the evaporation of weakly saline seawater. So, as I said, as I described earlier on, you've got this briny, dirty, whatever, and they were brine. They were brine sort of. There was a program on it in the Industrial Revolution. This was quite big in places like Staffordshire and places sort of in the heart of the country, like places like Nantwich and Cheshire and so on. So what we've got is we've got we've got the importance of salt throughout history. It's massive. So what I want us to do now, I want us to go with looking at the images that we've already got, and then what I say right, I go into this document that I got in front of me. Now I'm just going to pick bits out of the document and try and see if we can flow with it. So basically, just sort of thinking about this, we've done that bit. So Essex coastline, these are only some areas because you get the whole of them in loads of places in Britain that missing in this. But large amounts of briquetage have been found along the Essex coastline. So in other words, mass manufacture of salt, in Essex, big time. Cheshire and Worcestershire archaeological excavations have produced evidence of salt production in these areas, but in smaller quantities because it's inland. Middlewich excavations have revealed brine kilns. They've got whole kilns associated with this. Type earthenware vessels for the brine. Right, Middlewich. There we go.
Stanford, I've been there.
Oh, what do
Oh
you
no,
want to know?
Stanford.
No, that's a university, a plank. That's in the States, isn't it? Anyway,
Mm.
where is Stanford anyway, Anne, if you've been there?
Uh, Cambridgeshire, Lincolnshire, between Cambridge and Lincolnshire.
Well, that would make sense then.
Yeah.
That would make complete sense. Anyway, Anne, let's crack on, right? So Stanford Wharf Nature Reserve, evidence of salt marsh plants such as samphire or glasswort being used as fuel to evaporate brine and crystallized salt.
Oh.
So the point is, right? This is have anyone ever had a samphire? Right, I've had samphire.
Yes.
It's very it's. You've been with me, Anne,
Salty.
right?
It's
I,
salty.
I've given you a bit of salt, a bit. Yeah, exactly, Anne. It is extremely salty. It really, really is. And inland sources of salt were also used in the Iron Age, and salt was transported. As we know, it was either transported in briquetage or it was actually transported in organic made containers. So what we've got, we've got this now, and we're going to we're gonna look at this document. Which I've lovingly got in front of me, Anne, just for you. Yeah, and I do all this just for you. You know I do. And just give me a second. I'm just typing this in, and let's crack on. Right, so here we go. Bingo. Right. So there we go. We've got what's known as the Salt Way. The Iron Age landscape of the Salt Way. Now, the interesting thing is, I love this article, right? Because it's dated to March this year. So the research on this is basically as if, it's really, really new. So we look at Lincolnshire, and obviously on the left there we go. We've got Leicester there. On the left there, bottom left, you've got Leicester. And the A1, that's the course of I think that's the Ermine Street. Is that right? I think it is. And you've got this sort of great interaction with this landscape. So, by the way, I wanted to mention that if anyone follows me on YouTube, right, that they will find that every single day I'm doing a 1-minute Roman video, right, and they're very popular. So I look at a Roman stone-built site in Britain, right? And I do a little minute video on it. So if anyone's interested in that, and it'll build up your knowledge. And by the way, it's just that reminder that if those of you haven't got a copy of Romans in South Wales, need to let me know as soon as you possibly can. I know, Anne, you've got 12 copies, but that's you. So the Iron Age landscape of the Salt Way, and we've got this sort of discussions of the origins of the Salt Way, and the geographical features along the Salt Way are greatly sort of diverse, because on the right hand side in Lincolnshire you've got the fens, right, and there's an interesting story about that. And as you go into Leicestershire, you've got this Salt Way, and you're thinking, well, this is like the Silk Route from sort of India to China, and then from India then on to Europe. And you're thinking, but this is the Salt Way, right?
Yeah.
And the one thing that we're going to one thing we're going to jump into straight away is that the Romans weren't responsible for building the Salt Way. It already existed. The transportation route of the salt from the Lincolnshire fens and then further on east, the coastline, right? And then you follow the Salt Way from Lincolnshire into Leicestershire. and the like brownie stuff on the right, that's sort of the brownie stuff at times that would be underwater, right? Particularly 3,000 years ago.
Mm.
And what we've got this rootway that sort of is characteristic by the fact that the saltway itself goes across river systems and sort of goes across this landscape. But it's massively important. It's hugely important. So the importance of this road to salt transport in the Iron Age cannot be underestimated. It's also known as Salter's Way, right? Not just the Salt Way, Salter's Way. Now, the Romans, right, this is rather interesting, right? Back in 1955, there was a writer called Magaret. I've got a copy of his book. And Magaret was this big writer on Roman road routes in Britain. In fact, he was obsessed by it, right? He wrote this massively thick book, right? And I've still got a copy of it, right? And he wrote this in 1955. It's been updated like 1,000 times. Now, he said that this routeway in red was actually built by the Romans. But we now know that it existed before the Romans because salt was massive in Britain before the Romans and then before the Neolithic period and so on and so on. So what we can really understand is that the salt itself moved from Lincolnshire inland. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to explain a little bit of this, and we're going to go up till past, and then Pat can go and I don't know, go and get a coffee. I'm sat here at this minute, so
Actually, do you know what's just popped into my mind?
And let's have a bit of your popping into your mind. We haven't had much to pop into your
I
mind,
just thought, you know, we have got access to the sea all around our country, but you know, other places haven't got access to the sea, to salt water, and so there would be a sort of reason to trade it, you know, because of this.
Yeah.
I just thought of it, how valuable it was in, you know, places where they haven't got a sea. They wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't be able to take it from seawater. They'd have to do some other way.
Obviously the brine, the sort of brine processing route inland. You know, I know I got excited earlier on about this massive load of salt, but then again, I'm sure communities inland are going to be inundated with these salt cakes and all the rest of it. But it's just like it's massive, Anne. It's huge.
Yeah.
There's loads of it.
Yeah.
You know, I know exactly what you're saying, Anne. I'm not dismissing anything that you're saying. It is very valuable what you're saying, and it's like and it's like the weird thing when we look at Cumbria. It's like, right, okay, we got loads of salt in Cumbria, right, and we got the salt in Cheshire, and in Cumbria they've got the stone axes, right, and then in the Neolithic period they're trading salt with people in Cumbria for the stone axes when they've already got salt. So there must have been salt connoisseurs. There must have been different grades of salt. And actually, you know, when
it's gone underground, hasn't it? It's
yeah,
because it's obviously been flooded by seawater as well as
the brine
water.
different types of brine, because the point that we made that quote from China 4,700 years ago, the Chinese are talking about 40 different types of salt, right? Are we talking about all the different types of salt in Britain? I know this sounds absolutely mad. Carl's talking about the different types of salt in the how less or more interesting can you get? But the fact of the matter is, this is fascinating. This is a subject that we've completely lost. It's do you know what? I'm my head is thinking that have I missed a whole subject? You know, that most archaeologists miss. Right, you go to university and probably never going to come across salt being mentioned at all. Now, where was the source of the salt in Iron Age Lincolnshire? Now, because here we go. Let's listen to this. Now, the area on the right there. So, what we got to go to another plan, right? This is interesting. There's another plan, right? So the stuff on the right is Lincolnshire. Stuff on the left is coming into Leicestershire, right? And then the dark stuff is upland stuff, and the grey stuff is the fen-like stuff that's been Oh, you can read it on the map anyway. So this is your like LiDAR. So anyway, it goes on to say, before the drainage of the fen, these marshlands were described as the site of a battle between maritime waters of the sea and the fresh waters of the rivers. Now, isn't that poetic? But the fact of the matter is, that's what it was like. Sometime around 1001 years BC, the climate of Britain became cooler and wetter. Sea levels rose, and the previously freshwater Lincolnshire fenlands were turned into marine, saline environmental landscapes with saline little miniature lakes. Seawater came in from the coast along creeks up to the western edge at Horrimbling. There you go, Horrimbling there, it's in the centre of the screen, and created a salt marsh. The salt was extracted from the seawater at these creeks in locations known as salterns, right? Salterns, right? These are again, there's a mixed match of what these terms mean back and forth, you know. Salt was extracted from the seawater at these creeks in locations known as the salterns. So basically, these are trapping areas for salt. In the modern drained fen, the silted up ancient creeks can be still seen. They stand about a metre high than the surrounding land and are called rodents. So in other words, the rodents are the white areas. Right? Those areas that are a metre higher than this boggy, shitty, fenny, dirty landscape where they're extracting salt. Right? Those white areas are where people are living. But then eventually all that sort of grey stuff is eventually being overtaken by sort of normal agricultural land. And when we go south of this, Anne, we've got Must Farm and Peterborough, right? So that's the type of landscape we're talking about. And it's only since the 1970s that archaeologists have really been going into this stuff. But then again, I was born in the mid 1970s, and I've had years to come across this stuff. I haven't read a single notation about this salt stuff at all in my entire bloody life. And where has it been hiding? And I've got no qualms on admitting that, you know. It makes me, Anne, it makes me feel so uneasy that there are bits of history that I have completely missed. Because if I've completely missed this one, right, what else have I missed? Do you know what I mean? I'm admitting it, folks. I'm not a Bible of all knowledge. A LiDAR elevation map at the fen
It's
edge.
all
Don't
right.
agree.
We sometimes see it on the telly, you know, what you don't tell us.
Shut up, Anne. Shut up. And then the following week I do it, right, with the scale. There we go. We got that. The brown circles are recorded scatters of Iron Age briquetage. Now, on these margins, right, these are some areas where they're processing this salt. But the fact of the matter is, right, these are the archaeological sites that we've excavated. 90% of British archaeological sites haven't been excavated. So how many are there on the screen in that box? Right, in that sort of 18-kilometer wide box. So if we got like, I can't even say there's 30 sites there. So if we times that by 10, right, in that area, right, there are 300 processing Iron Age sites from that sample that we've got in that small area. So in other words, this is blinking massive. It really, really is.
Yeah.
Whew. So
it is, because, you know, I did bring it up once, that in Ireland, where I go for holidays, there's a place called the salt pans. I think
you haven't brought it up before. Tell us now.
It's just called salt pans, you know, and it's just an area of the beach, really. But I don't. There's nothing there, but there obviously was.
So were there salt pans on the beach cut into the rock? We want to know.
Yeah, there must have been. I don't know. I have to go over and find out.
Well, you're gonna bloody have to, Anne. End of.
I will. It's on a loch, a sea loch, so it is salt water.
Yes.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they did, you know, that it was going on there for quite some time.
Yeah.
Because the Vikings went there, you know. Well, that's not long ago, but yeah. So, all right, I'll find out as much as I can.
Oh, right. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I think you should. By the way, you've got a big fan online. There's two. There's called David and the Dodgy Git, and they both love you, Anne. They want to hear more of your voice. So anyway, excavations at Billingborough. You can see the bit at Billingborough on there. Excavations at Billingborough in the 1970s told us straight away we got a salt making place there, right? And we've got evidence going back into the Bronze Age, 800 years BC. There's a point to be made here in a minute, which I'm going to mention. Another site further north at Hepringham. There we go. There's Hepringham on there. Has also been excavated, indicating that salt making took place here between 400 and 100 years BC. Right. So the point is that we've got this evidence being excavated. We've got period sites of different times when we've got this excavated evidence. And the thing is, right, it's so exciting that if I said the following before the 1970s, right, before the 1970s, people may have been coming across this briquetage and thinking it's just broken pottery.
Yeah.
And that's all. It's just broken pottery. They were a bit careless. They deliberately broke the bloody things. That's the point. You know, it's just it turns archaeology on the head, right? 1 minute there's these careless people breaking these pots because we're looking at it wrongly, and the next minute they're deliberately breaking these wonderful pots that Anne's made. And it's just like there's just so much interesting stuff here. There really is. It's such a valuable palimpsest of archaeological information. As the sea levels fell, there we go on the right hand side, right? As the sea levels fell on the right hand side, it was by about 500 years BC. The marine environment retreated, and the salt extraction slowly moved eastwards. By the Roman period, an area east of Donington became the centre of salt production. Right. So you know, this is amazing stuff, right? So in other words, what's happening is that on the left there in the middle of those places, Billington, Hepringham, and Horbingham, those were the Iron Age processing. Those were the sort of early Iron Age processing or Bronze Age processing sites, right? But then the processing sites moved further east because the salt areas are drying out, so they've got to process them closer to where the site is. Places like Donington. That's exactly what we're saying. So basically, the salt processing is going further and further east as the salt is receding, right? So anyway, so what we're going to do, we're going to have a break now because I've got somebody trying to desperately get hold of me, and we're going to have a break. So Anne, you get the first dibs because nobody's heard your voice for the whole lecture.
No, it's very interesting because you know, we don't hear a lot about it, but they have had some people now. Rock salt is becoming and sea salt becoming more popular in the last 10 years. You know, they've got areas in Anglesey and places like that that are making salt. So they
Yeah,
showed the process, you know, a few times.
It's quite interesting industry, isn't it? It's just like, oh God, there's just so much there. You know, it's
Yeah.
missing industry. You know,
No, it's fine. It's fine what you've told us. It's
I'm glad you agree. I'm glad you agree, Anne. That's good. Anything right? I need right. Anything you want to say, Richie, babes?
No, really interesting.
Thanks, love.
That's to offer.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Who else have we got now? Henry, anything you want to say, darling?
Did you know salt was the main constituent of a fire extinguisher?
Oh no.
Yeah, but they didn't have bloody fire extinguishers back then. But you could put a fire out with a bucket of salt.
You could put a grease fire out with salt.
Well, it's worth knowing. I haven't got
Where
much salt at the
the grease
moment.
fire, Anne? Oh, by the way, your husband's just run in the room. She said, I've got a grease fire. And then you suddenly realise we need to use salt, but you
Yeah.
haven't got a bucket of salt. You failed
All
your
right,
husband, Anne, again.
Haven't you heard of the R&H Kebab House?
Cough.
The
Right,
Irish
okay.
kebab house.
Yeah, the Iron Age Balti. What?
Flintstones.
No! Flipping heck. Right, okay. Henry, Goff, anything you want to say?
Yeah, I don't know whether you, I think I told you a couple of years ago, we went to southern Austria to a place called Hallstatt.
Oh,
Oh,
Famous,
lush, yes.
it's got a salt mine dating back to the early Iron Age, 800 BC. And Hallen is the Celtic word because Hallstatt is said to be the birthplace of the Celtic culture. So the Celtic word for salt is Hallen, which is the Welsh
Alan,
word
yes.
for salt.
oh, wow.
And of course, Hallen Mon, Anglesey salt, it was once very, very famous salt.
Yeah.
And also in Austria, you've got Salzburg, obviously, because that is
Go on.
the German for salt and the Latin, sal. And Hallstatt, the Romans went there, obviously, to get the salt. And they built the very first brine pipeline from the salt mine, transport the salt down liquid form, and then probably put in those things you were on about, the containers to export.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting place.
Yeah. I did. Yeah, they do get it from rocks and caves as well.
There's a mine. It's a
Yeah,
salt mine.
mine it.
It's a salt mine.
It's
It's a salt mine.
Yeah, you mine it just like
Fantastic.
yeah.
That's great.
You can go to
blocks of salt.
I went down there with a helmet on.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, what was it like?
Fascinating. But isn't that interesting about the Celtic word for
Was he white?
is Hallen, and it's also the Welsh word, which is a Celtic language. So the culture did spread, it did exist,
Yeah,
Now,
that's interesting.
did happen.
Yeah. Even though Carl doesn't believe in Celtic.
No, I know. That's proved him wrong.
Hang on a minute. I said I've always this Celtic thing stays in Europe but not here. But then we'll talk about that again.
Well, how do you explain the Celtic language then? It is in Austria.
Yeah, well, it's in Austria.
I'll call it a European language.
Well, we speak it here. Celtic.
Oh.
You winding me up.
Yeah, you're a bit bigoted on that bit, Carl. A bit like the Normans. You've got it in for them.
Yeah.
He's got it in for him. He's a very naughty boy.
Anyway,
I love that.
Very interesting. And I read a book called Salt once, which is about how salt at one time was traded like gold.
Yes.
It was a big industrial thing in the world, the export of salt at one time.
Yeah. Right, come on then. Who's next?
Oh yeah, it's Anne's lecture, isn't it? So yeah, can we go for coffee now, Anne?
And you didn't really interrupt Goff enough. Then you really let the slide down. I wanted to tell you to shut up.
I'll turn myself off.
Good idea.
Yeah. I'll turn it off.
Oh God. Right, and you don't have to. Right, we'll have a break in a minute. Right. Okay, Henry. Anything you want to say?
He did.
He already has.
He said.
No, I didn't mean Goff. I meant Pat. It's the same bloody difference. I got confused then.
No, thank you. I did enjoy it and got to think about salt a lot, and places I've seen where there's salt plants in these various countries. They'll have they take you in a bus and you go somewhere and there's all these big pools, and I don't know if they got other chemicals or just salt or what, but it's a big thing.
Kentucky.
Salt.
Oh,
We've opened
Kentucky.
we've opened a
Oh,
box of salt, you know. Right. Okay. Anyway, thanks for that, Pat.
Yeah, yeah.
the Everly brothers came from Kentucky.
Oh my bloody God! Right, we're gonna have a break now and talk about the Everly brothers in your own blooming time. Talk to Pat. We'll have a 10-minute break.
Oh, it's coal mine.
get started. I haven't got all bloody day. Where is the frigging Muppet?
What dodgy car park is he sat in?
Oh,
I saw
what
Wolf
do you mean? What
fall.
did you? What?
I saw Wolf fall.
Look. Right. Okay. I'm. Yeah. Whatever. Right. I got some film work coming up soon, right? And I'll be in loads of different car parks, but we won't talk about that. Right. Anyway, let's crack on. Anne, are you ready to get down to the undies? Let's crack on. Right. Okay. Let's get on to the share. Right.
There's
Do
a
you know what?
lorry behind you.
Do you know what? Do you know what? Goff looks very macho when he stretches his arms up in the air. It's almost as if, you know. And what? I don't know what's going on anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't. Right. Anyway, what we got to do is we've got to chat about this. Where was the salt exchange? That is the big thing. Now, this is interesting, right? There's a folklore in one area of the Midlands. It goes as follow. And this is apparently goes all the way back to the Iron Age, this bit of folklore. Folklore says that salt was transported along the Salt Way over the Sour and into the Midlands, further away. But there is little evidence to support that statement until now. Right. So in other words, what people used to do, they used to look at the folklore and said, oh, you know, salt being transported in prehistoric period, no evidence of that. And now the evidence is of the contrary. So what we're really looking at is that we've got inland sources of salt, we've got coastal sources of salt. The manufacture of salt from the various sources, is very, very wide ranging. Now, when we look at inland sites, we can sort of start to get an indication from some of the briquetage left of the salt transportation. However, if the salt is being transported, you know, after the briquetage has been broken up in places, in Leicestershire or places that have been broken up in Lincolnshire or Cheshire or Cumbria or Essex, the evidence for salt being transported around is absent because the organic materials that these are transported around the country and in sort of wicker baskets, or is transported around the country in nettle bags or whatever, right? But the point is that people inevitably needed salt wherever they were in Britain. And as we're finding mass evidence of salt manufacture around the coast and in some inland sites that's reliable on brine, that obviously testates that lots of people have got access to salt. Whether the reed baskets or the briquetage is on site or not, we're actually knowing that people had access to the salt because of the mass usage of salt throughout history. Where were the settlements along the Salt Way? So interesting enough, looking at about this sort of link here, some of the sites have been examined. And what these dots tell us, right? So what these dots tell us. So in other words, distribution of domestic sites along this route, right? Forget about what's below the dotted line. Above the dotted line, above the area of the survey is within the dotted line in the middle of the bit where the red line is. So just distribution of domestic enclosures shown as, so there we go, these black and sort of white circles. They're dotted around. Those ones that are just plainly shown in white, we've got these sites associated with the Iron Age. So the black dots themselves again indicate more of these Iron Age sites, and also we've got evidence of hill forts around this landscape, these brown little bits. But the one thing that we can clearly say is that lots of these sites are in close proximation with the Salt Way, which is that red dotted line. And one thing that is really interesting is the archaeological sites between Melton Mowbray and Leicester. That's a 5 kilometer corridor of archaeological sites. And you can see that there's a dense concentration of these archaeological sites between Melton, Mowbray, and Leicester. And this is naturally very significant. Lots of Iron Age sites. And this might be to do with the fact that they've got close access to this salt way. And also within this landscape, there's ironstone as well. So they're exploiting iron and they're exploiting access to the salt way. So what we very much have is the sense that there is an aspiration to see this culture within the Iron Age as being rich in lots of resources and not just metal. One thing that one thing we're going to quickly look at now, we're going to look at some LiDAR images of 3 of these hill forts. So what we've got, we're going to look at Honington Camp, which is up there on the right hand side. There's another site called Round Hill, which is definitely a round site. What we're also going to look at is another site as well, which is Borough Hill, which is there. And these sites with the next screen, these are the LiDAR. Now, we're checking these in as a little bit of a red herring. Hang on a minute, Carl's not doing hill forts today. He's not really doing settlements. But these hill forts, there's a few of them. So these hill forts, when you think about it, these brown hill forts on there, and you've got the settlements, and you've got everything else that's going on there, associated with the Salt Way, right? These hill forts must have had access to the salt. They store salt at these sites? Okay, and that's the point. You know, let's say something ridiculous, but it might not sound ridiculous. At some of these hill fort sites, they're projecting salt. They're not storing animals at these places. They might actually be places that salt is protected and stored, right? And that is something really, really strange. You know, when we think about, for example, hill forts, we think about, okay, a hill fort, bank and a ditch, right? In lots of them, we don't find lots of houses in them, and there's no real wells in lots of them. Some of them there is wells and pools. Some of there are lots of settlements, houses in them. But lots of them are inevitably used for different purposes, to keep animals over certain times of the year, to store grain, to store other resources, managed by a small group of people for the community. And again, they may have stored salt at these places, right? And why are the banks and ditches there? We've had this conversation many times. Is it for status? Is it to defend against wild animals? Is it defend against people? You know, and so on and so on. But if they're using these places, let's just chuck a few terms in there, as emphasized banks of places that things are stored, things start to make a lot more sense when we start looking at the Iron Age, right? I never said it. Maybe the 5,000 hill forts, one associated with each community across Britain, one associated with each Iron Age community across Britain, right? These places themselves tell us that these are the banks of the day. These are places that things are kept, right, including salt. So, you know, obviously you're not going to be worried about foxes running away with your salt. You might be worried about a fox killing all your baby lambs and all your chickens and stuff. But the foxes ain't going to be running away with your salt. But then again, there's lots of these hill forts across the landscape. So we've got to link that in with the mix. And you're thinking, well, okay, Carl, if you don't have bricotage at these sites, you don't have actually the salt, how do you know the salt was there in absence of evidence? It doesn't mean to say the salt must have been going somewhere. End of. Me and Anna had the discussion earlier on. Salt was so important. It was a commodity. It was massively important. The salt was so important that the pottery that they made was valueless compared with the value of the salt, right? And they were making loads of it. So in thinking about this, and trying to get to grips with this whole thing, going back to this chart, right, discussing this, let's have a little bit of a discussion. Going back to the end, these end of these notes. So the factors influencing the tracks of early roads are numerous. Pre-Roman trackways, pre-Roman roads are numerous. They're social, they're geological connections with, they're there because the landscape is rough, so you put a trackway there. Are the roadways ritualistic? In the case of the Saltway, the roadway is purely economic, and in earlier times influenced as much by animal movement as by people. So you're thinking one moment that these salt ways, these salt transit landscapes, are linked in with everything that we've mentioned. So these factors, these things are very much into understanding the depth and the intricacies of this massively interesting Iron Age. And again, this trackway, linking everything together. Salt produced on the right-hand side in the fen-like landscape, moving west, not only by the Saltway, but by waterways as well. The one thing that we've missed with all this, that's the salt is just not moving along that routeway, right? It's moving away every single transportation means that they could transport the salt, right? So a trackway was built so that the major commodity of this landscape could move around. But salt, like everything else, is moving around the landscape in very, very many different ways. And when we think about this, the fen edge probably moved west by a variety of routes throughout the 800 years of the Iron Age, as the landscape started to dry up and the salt, briny landscape started to turn over to agriculture. So therefore, this routeway gets longer and longer all the way to the sea to move this salt around. And then factors telling us about the importance of salt go as follows. Other factors may have also come into play. The tribal landscape could have governed the production of movement of salt. And when we think about the turbulent times of the Iron Age, the interrelationship between the fen edge on the right communities and those of Leicester and East Leicestershire is a fascinating aspect of the period. In so many ways, we haven't mentioned violence or warfare once today, and we'll mention it now. If people are cutting each other up and destroying each other's communities, why have you got this trade in various commodities stretching all the way across Britain? Not salt, lime, barley, flint, copper, tin, iron, and so on. The tribal structure that emerged into the Iron Age sees that people may have been more political, away from warfare, and more trading in the modern commerce that we would understand today. The Saltway was forged not by the Romans, but by the Iron Age people that made it their living. The Saltway is therefore an appropriate name, but the Saltway may have much earlier roots than just the Iron Age that we've been talking about today. We haven't quite finished, because what we're going to do, we're going to just look at these images and we're going to see if there's anything else that we've missed. And we've missed this. The reconstruction of this technology, trying to work out how this works. We're going to do that briefly. And then we'll link this in. One thing that links society across Europe, the Celtic society of Europe, mainland Europe, is salt. And just reiterate, this Celtic culture, this Celtic sense, is something that I see as a culture, not as a movement of people. And that's my big bugbear. We use it as a sense of architecture, civilization, and even language, but not movement of people. That's my big bugbear. Anyway, and then we talk about some of the furniture of these things. We'll do that now. We'll get through this now, right? So why have we got some sort of peaty stuff and sort of some salty stuff? You know, that's full of the samphire on the left there, and that's to sort of and that's to sort of burn and sort of mix in and sort of act as a flux for the briny salt and all the rest of it. So this is all part of the processing. So if we think about this and we sort of finalize everything. So archaeological evidence of Iron Age salt making includes briquetage. We've mentioned this, those pots that have those supporting pillars that are found in various landscapes across Britain. We've mentioned the salt marsh plants, evidence of salt marsh plants such as samphire or glasswork being used as fuel to evaporate the brine itself. So it's a sort of element of this whole process. Experiments have shown that burning these plants and adding them to seawater yields more salt than seawater alone, and then you get the end result. During the Iron Age, salt was made, as we know, by the evaporation of seawater, the brine inland. So crystallization, harvesting. That's interesting. I like that. So the end word there, it says harvest. The salt was obtained by breaking the vessels, so hence harvesting. That's a new way of understanding. So we're going to harvest salt by breaking open the vessels that were made by Anne, and therefore we trade this valuable salt across the landscape. Now, last night I made a little bit of a. I didn't make an error, but the interpretation. What happened last night? I was describing reconstruction archaeology, and when I was describing the reconstruction within archaeology, I basically said, right, the pot on the left the green pot has been fired, right, and then they're filled with this sort of briny sort of slurry. That looks too pure, by the way. And then it's heated on a fire without legs. It's fired, right? And then somebody jumped in last night and said, "Oh, you're wrong, Carl." And I said, "What do you mean I'm wrong?" And they said, "Oh, by using the word firing, you're referring to the pots being fired a second time for glaze." And I said, "Oh, right." And he said, "That's why you've got the word heating." And I thought, right, yeah. So in other words, even though the pot itself is heated twice, it's fired and then heated, don't use the word firing twice, right? Because the object is made, is fired in a kiln, is then filled with slurry, and then the pot is not fired over the fire, it's heated over the fire, right? So I was gladly corrected on that, because it made it it made it sound better. And then you're breaking the pot. Now when we obviously some people online are talking about sort of using this as a trade, you know, and so on. When you're looking at this, And you're thinking, right, why do they need to break it every time? We had this conversation last night, and it came quite easy, right? When you make a pot, right, you fire it, and then you would fire it again by adding a slip, right? And then when you're heating contents in that sort of container vessel, right, the contents of the vessel don't make it into the wall of the pot, hence cracking the pot. Um, um, because of the glaze. So the glaze stops the liquid from getting into the pot, right? But when you've got this sort of these objects which are filled with brine or salt slurry, whether you're doing panning along the coast or you're doing brine collection inland, right? You're filling these up, you're heating them, they're not firing, you're heating them. Some of the liquid gets into the pot, and it's likely that this is cracking the pots anyway, right? And then you're breaking them and you're getting the salt cake, right?
Yeah.
Now, I prefer to think that there's more to this than that, because eventually they would have made very thick pots. They would have made very thick pots, and that would have meant that they wouldn't have cracked on the fire. But in this case, they are. So this is experimental archaeology. And this is saying, the pots are cracking in the fire, right? Not always, but it might also be the case that the salt cake attaches on the inside of the unglazed fired pot. Therefore, you've got to crack it to try and get the salt cake out intact. And then the whole process starts to make sense. But this is a very wasteful thing indeed. What we do is that we think about modern day society and we think about wastage. But to make one salt cake, they had to make a pot, fire it, heat it, and then it was broken open, and the bits of the briquetage discarded, and then you're left with a salt cake. And this is hence we find the evidence. And actually, the other thing as well is, if you went to a standard archaeological site and you found thousands of bits of briquetage, right, and you could try to work out, say, there's 20 bits of pot to the 10,000 bits of briquetage, right, usually 20 fragments of pot to, then you can subdivide that, and then you can work out how many salt cakes they made at that one site at a certain period of time. Also, some of this briquetage would have been ground up and used for pathways and all sorts of things. The Romans did it. So here we go. The briquetage technique is attested in prehistoric sites. We know that. We've been looking at that tonight. We tested the hypothesis. The hypothesis that withstood the experiment is using salt slurry instead of brine, right? And obviously the efforts involved, we've seen that processing reveal the high value of prehistoric salt cakes. Here's some more experiments in archaeology, and obviously this is based on various bits of archaeological evidence that we're excavating across various sites across Europe. And obviously it looks like lots of these pots may have survived, but then again, if the salt's attached to the inside of the pot, then the pot's going to be broken to get the salt cake. And this image here, it's talking about evidence of salt exploration in Europe from as early as 6,000 years ago. And as we know, it goes 8,000 years ago, from sites in Romania, from sites in Bosnia, sites in Poland, and none of these have the telltale legs on them, because basically, if you look at that conical there, if you put a load of these into a fire and you set the fire alight, right, the coals technically should still support these things whilst the liquid associated with the salt is evaporating. So this is lots of the evidence that we see in Europe. And back to this little thing to get to the end bit. We're talking about these huge earthenware pans these 60 centimeter wide pans, 120 centimeters long, and 12 millimeters thick. And the strong brine was then evaporated in small pottery vessels, as we know with the pillars. And basically what we could say is that these pillared vessels may have rested against something like this in a kiln, right, to keep them upright so they don't fall over. These were all being tightly compacted into some kind of clamp kiln in the ground. You know, a clamp kiln is basically a circular hole in the ground, right? And it's basically piled up with wood and so on. And you might have a framework like this. All the pots are compacted together. They're evaporation pots, and then they're broken. And these are the legs. And again, I'm sure archaeologists finding these in the past wouldn't have had a clue what the hell these were, but now we can actually tell because you've got evidence of salt residue in the bases of these things to indicate that these are actually parts of the pots that once held salt, and then the vessel was broken, the legs remain, the briquetage discarded, and the salt cake is naturally the end result. On that note, I'm a bit knackered. We've actually done a lot there now. So let's see if there are any questions. And what we're going to do is we're going to go with Anne, and hopefully when Goff speaks, Anne will interrupt. However, we've got some stuff in the chat box. It says, Henry, you would want to reduce the weight, so remove pot better to move the cakes. Exactly. You know, if you're, yeah, that's a point that I was trying to make earlier on. Didn't actually make it as clear as I did yesterday. But the point is, what we've got is that if you transport the pots, which it might be 2 or 3 times the weight of the salt, with the salt in them, it means you're not able to move much salt around. By removing the pot, you're able to move the cakes, and lots of them, and you're able to go straight to the market. You have very large salt mines in Poland and Northern Ireland. And a point to be made here, there's another point to be made here, right? And Goff's point as well, from Hallstatt in Germany. If you've got lots of salt that you don't need to do much work with, you could just hack it out and put it in a basket, right? That means that with the salt that's going through this laborious process to evaporate the liquid and so on, right? When in fact you've got lots of salt that is just easily mined, right? That adds to the fact that there's a hell of a lot of salt in circulation, right? And I think this was absolutely fascinating to have looked at this today.
Sodium,
right, Anne.
This is sodium salt.
Yeah, sodium, yeah.
Sodium. So, yeah, I mean, it's part of Earth's, you know, what it's made of. And I suppose, yeah, I think, well, obviously, I did hear that they use the salt in Northern Ireland for the roads. They, you know, for the roads to make them,
yeah.
And, you know, we probably got some in Wales.
Yeah, but that's
well.
and that's now, not back in the day.
I know, but what I'm saying is that they're varying qualities, varying degrees.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
You know, would be used for different things. I'd be interested to know what they would use, the gritty, salty, although it's probably mixed with sand, you know, we probably mix it with sand. So yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, it's been interesting tonight.
Oh, I'm glad I got your approval, Anne. It's always good to have your approval. That's good. Right, so Anne, you can interrupt Goff several times when he's talking. We got no problem with it. Right, so here we go. Let's just write this off. So Goff, anything you want to say, love?
Yeah, it's very interesting. By the way, I know when I was working and I would go to Britain Ferry to the ports to do the surveys on the ships. There was a regular service just before the winter from Ireland to Britain Ferry with rock salt, for the.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Oh.
And that is, you don't add anything to it, and it comes as rock salt. It's not pure salt in it. And that's exported from Wexford.
Gosh.
Yeah, but very interesting lecture. Very good. Thank you, Anne, for telling me all about salt. That's good. I'm glad you brought Carl with you this week. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to have been along to Anne's lecture. It's been a really good one. Yeah. So you've got nice hairy arms, by the way, Goff. By the way, Goff, when you go into Madeira, because I want a Madeira cake.
We're going on May. Yeah, I'll book the cake. I'm baking it now.
Oh, but well, yeah, I know that because they're quite hard, didn't they? Yeah, so I crack on. So a bit hard, Hey, Goff, should we have a Lanford Major class meal, and we'll invite the old gang like Jim.
Oh, yeah, lovely. Yeah.
About me. I'm not.
Yeah, you can. Hey, you can go, Anne, but me and Goff are going to be away that day, ain't we, Goff?
Oh, Barry will do it. Barry's
good lecture, Carl. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Goff. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Right, okay then. And for your contribution about Hallstatt, that was really good. The Hallen and the name of the salt, and yeah, I really liked that. That was good. Thanks.
I've got photos if you're interested. Like slideshow, yeah.
Yeah, well, send me one or two. I'd like to see them. Yeah, that'd be good.
All right, I'll root them out.
Good, please do. Right, Henry, anything you want to say, love?
No, really interesting. One thing you should do is take a little trip to Poland to see the salt mines at Krakow.
Yeah.
Because I think they run, I might be wrong, might be right, but they run for about 100 kilometers plus.
Yeah.
And it basically goes down levels, about umpteen levels, and there's a church carved in the rock salt.
I saw that. Church carved out of rock salt.
And I think there's even a sculpture of you at the bottom with the hope you never come out.
Is that statue of Lloyd George as well?
No, he wasn't allowed.
Oh, all right then. Fair enough. I am so confused what we're talking about now. I statues and massive, endless salt. Yeah. Right, okay then. Okay, thank you for that, Henry. Right, Pat. We haven't heard from Pat much today. It's almost as if she's been silenced by Anne.
Oh, no, I've been having my evening meal.
Oh.
I didn't want to eat in front of all of you. And, yeah, I've been looking on my phone to see if I could learn more. And I guess it was the food preservation, that really helped out civilization, because they didn't have to eat and hunt the same day, They had preserved food, that they could use. So, that's where a lot of the salt went, and where people wanted it and needed it. Yeah. So, anyhow,
that's true. Oh yeah, obviously.
Well, you can get salt flakes.
Hang on, who's talking? Anne, shut up a minute.
Pat, what did you say they saw?
Oh, they could. Excuse me. they could do the leather. Prepare the leather for clothing.
Tanning,
tanning.
Yeah.
So because they're trying to think what do they do with all this salt, But
right.
As you said, they needed it, and
for the leather.
Yeah, leather. Make it soft. And...
Oh well, it's probably they have to use things that are less, more popular than urine and horses things and.
Yeah, well, I gotta be honest with you. Goff contacted me earlier on. He said, "Should I have a bath full of salt or pig's urine?" I said, "I'd go with the salt, love."
Carl, you've got to stop interrupting Anne when she's speaking. It's very.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry, Goff. I really am.
It's annoying me.
Oh, all right. All right. God's sake, you can't take a joke these days. You know what I mean? Anyway,
Sorry.
Anne looks like a blob tonight. Right, okay. But by the way, somebody's talking about cow guts and borax, but we won't go there. Right, Richard.
Yeah. Well, Andrew's liver salt. I mean, let's face it, they are salt. Or they just crystals? Oh, I think they're just crystals.
Yeah.
Made
Okay,
out
then,
of
right, okay.
soda.
Yeah.
Soda crystals.
Soda crystals, yeah, soda.
Yeah.
Right. So what? Right, okay then. Right, finally, Richard.
Yeah, so interesting subject. Very interesting. As I say, all these places, even now, there's loads of places, aren't there? The saltings. Usually on the coast, you get, little areas.
The salt pans, these great big salt pans, exactly. So obviously it's all down to archaeological interpretation. It's 1 minute the evidence means one thing, and then we eventually know what the evidence means. It's just you can imagine being on an archaeological excavation. Oh, there's all this pottery. It's indication that they've lived here for hundreds of years, and they were really careless with their pottery when in fact they were actually mass producing salt.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know.
I forgot one place for you to look at. Keyhaven has large salt pans opposite the Isle of Wight, which is opposite the site that's submerged.
Oh, right. Boulder Cliff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's at the other side, and it's a large salt area. It has been for hundreds, maybe going back 1,000 years.
What, on the Isle of Wight?
No, it's opposite. It's on Keyhaven, which is next to Lymington.
Oh, Leamington Spa. Right, okay.
No,
Lymington.
Oh, Leamington, not Leamington Spa. Leamington
Leamington.
Spa's further inland. Leamington on the coast. I don't know where bloody Leamington on the coast is. All right, okay, fair enough.
Get your map out.
All right, I'll get my map out and stop talking. Exactly. I'll stop interrupting you as well, Henry.
Have you asked Goff about the tower?
Yeah, ask Goff about the tower. Go on, Goff. And you have a quick conversation with Goff about the tower.
No, he wants to go home.
I am home.
And I'm not going to interrupt.
Should it be painted or not?
What about the tower? What about it?
Well, the one from the docks.
Yeah, what about it?
It's been transported inland.
Yeah. And
we're trying to decide whether to leave it as concrete or paint it.
Why would you paint it?
Well, we're thinking of green.
Why?
Only to make it look pretty.
Well, surely, if it's an archaeological, if it's you don't want to spoil it. You want to keep it as it was, surely.
Yeah. I suppose. Is there any way we can find out if they were painted or not?
I don't think were they painted, Carl?
This is the big question. The point is with the Second World War tower that we've got outside Cowbridge now. It's when they were created. The grey would have looked very pale and white, and would have been operationally they could have been seen, right? But there is no evidence really that lots of these concrete structures were painted anyway.
I know the tower from when I was working, but it's always been concrete as far as I remember.
It's always been concrete.
Could we paint it like a ship, camouflaged, with stripes or something?
Or
swastikas.
I can't see.
They made it look
keep it as it was, surely.
Oh, you said green, didn't you, to go with the trees?
Oh, we need to really look into this.
Yeah.
Actually,
Tell you
All
what,
right.
mine,
actually,
No, it's all right, Garth. That's what we all thought. So
Carl?
we were probably
actually,
not
there is one thing. Goff, can you remember it being painted white?
No,
Mm,
no. If I remember it, it was concrete.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Carl?
cladding on it during the war or anything like that. I'm not sure. I'm obviously.
Oh, right. That's an idea.
I wouldn't
Well,
like
we need to think about it.
you
a bit
definitely
more.
should think about it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Carl, because I was over there. I suppose the first time I went over Atlantic sort of trading estate, I think it was about 1963.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I used to a friend of mine, his father was the manager of the enamel factory next door,
Oh yeah.
and he had the keys go in there to go picking blackberries. It was just full of
Oh.
blackberries.
Oh,
Thinking about it then nothing in there was sort of camouflaged.
no.
You know, it was just all concrete, you know, and all the sort of Nissan type storage huts. All the
Yeah.
roofs were black and everything. So
Yeah.
This we need to really think hard about this one. Yeah. Okay.
I wonder if those
Okay.
lookout posts really, if we're looking out for people to Barry who are going in there and nicking everything.
Oh well, nothing changes actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can imagine, can't you? A person from Gibbonsdown nicking a tank. You know, we'll just go off with a tank,
Just take it
or you know.
down.
Well, if they could dig up a Roman lead coffin and take it to the scrapyard,
No, that's true.
they're pretty dodgy.
I know those were the American servicemen. That's the bloody problem.
Yeah, I think we'll have to, think seriously about. We'll have to maybe detach it from its original. Just try and think of it where it is, like Richard said,
I
in
think
the
if
woods.
anything, it would have had just webbing over it.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That would look quite, authentic.
Yeah, Carl's red dress would do perfectly.
Oh, fuck off.
Oh, all right then. Right,
Oh,
well, thanks ever so much for tonight.
oh
And,
yeah, thanks, Anne. Yeah.
They'll let you go.
Thank you.
I'll go for
Yeah. Thanks
Thank
for letting
you.
me come, man. That's very kind of you.
Thanks, Anne. It's been really
It's been
good
really
tonight. Thanks.
wonderful. Thank you.
Really appreciate your contribution. Right, all right then. Well, look forward to seeing you all next week. If
Bye.
nobody's got anything else to say, I'm going to say good night. So good night, Goff, Pat,
Bye.
Anne, Henry, Richard, and everybody
Bye,
else
everyone.
online. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for
Yeah.
joining us.
All right,
And
then.
thanks for your
Good night.
kind words. Night,
Good
night.
night.
Bye. Bye.
Good
Night, night, folks. Night, night, everybody. Pat, Goff, Henry, the Pope,
Do I
Anne.
look like a blob?
Yeah, you do look like a blob.
I
Yeah,
got a
yeah.
backlight. I got a
But by
backlight.
the way, the comments that people have put on you about you, Anne, right? They're loving you.
Oh my goodness. Where are they from? What country?
There's somebody called Pa Taran. The guy who likes you is called the Dodgy Git Show.
Oh,
He asked me if you like pork sausages.
well, I do, yeah.
And then he's asked if you like cheese with them.
Peas? No.
Yeah.
I don't like peas.
Oh, right.
I only
Don't you?
like beans. No, I to be honest, I don't know. I like onion gravy with pork sausage.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's good. Well, Henry's writing all this down. So when you go over and stay with Henry, right?
Oh, Henry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you won't find me here in a few months, so don't worry.
Oh, where are you going?
I can't tell you.
Oh, secret mission. All
Yeah,
right.
it's a good message.
Okay, well, I don't know why we don't get together and have a cup of tea or something. Lunch. Do you ever see Owen?
Owen, yeah, he's still involved.
But,
I don't know. I would.
Del.
What, Del? What about it?
Well, we were supposed to get him to have lunch with him or something. Oh
Yeah,
no, it's all right.
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Who's there?
Right.
yeah, I think so.
I'll go because you might want to talk to Henry. So I'll just pop
Yeah,
off
me and
now.
Henry will have a spy talk about Akrotiri military base in Cyprus and its influence over the conflict with Israel. We won't talk about that. Oh, we're giving it all away.
And you're still online.
Yeah, I'm still online. Yeah, exactly. It's all good. It's all good. I
It's
better go and
only
get
that
some blames. What?
you've got a white apparition behind you.
Yeah, I
A
think it's Jesus.
manifestation.
Oh, right. That's the cover on my seat because I had to have some work done on the car. That's right. It's like it's like the white cover. Yeah, it's the only thing that makes. Yeah. Oh, wicked! Hang on a minute. See, it looks definitely like it now. Definitely.
Right,
That,
well,
that,
go and
that,
enjoy yourself.
yeah, I will. I gotta get home. All right, then. I'll speak to you soon, then, Henry.
Right, adios.
Take care. Adios, amigo. I'll speak to you soon. See you next week. Bye.
Best of luck.
Bye.
Best of luck dealing with Anne.
Oh my bloody God. I think what we should do is get a blow-up rubber doll version if she's not in the classes 1 week. I'll bloody interrupt as well. Christ.
You get going.
All right, then. I'll speak to you soon. Night.
Good night.
Thanks for your contribution. Night. Anyone who's still online, I thought I'd say that Tom is a filthy boy and he's the biggest gay in the village. And so is Ape, who's a monkey and looks like a chimpanzee and is somebody out of the Fraggles. And she's a lovely girl. She's a lovely girl. She's nice. Anyway, so here we go. We'll just go have a quick look in the chat box. It says, this is from Henry. It goes, Henry, in the chat box. It goes as follows. Henry, you would want to reduce the weight, so remove pot. Better to move cakes, i.e. salt cakes. And the next bit says, you have very large salt mines in Poland and Northern Ireland. And not salt cakes, but you have very large salt mines in Poland and Northern Ireland. So that's my salt cakes done. And that's my Poland and Northern Ireland mines. And we're going to call it a night. So thank you for joining us tonight. That's the chat done on 1, 2, 3. Chat done on 3. Nos da chi, diolch yn fawr i chi, gwelwch chi eto. Ymwrwch chi, don't forget to like.